I'm Dennis and this is a short video on creating Turnitin UK assignments in Blackboard. Before we start with Turnitin UK, we've got to make sure that your Blackboard module meets the requirements for the University of Salford standards for Blackboard modules. So you've got to make sure that they have an assessment area and a My Grades area in the menu. There are also a few things you need to remember. All summative assessments must be created within an assignments folder. So within Blackboard, in the assessment area, there needs to be a folder, and on that folder it has to have the student declaration text. We set up two Turnitin UK submission areas per assignment. One's a draft submission area, where students can submit their assignment to check references and citations, and we have a final submission area. That's the area where you go and you mark the submissions. Any new modules in Blackboard should already have an assessment area or an assessment folder set up for you. But if they haven't, or if you want to create a new one, it's very simple. You simply go to the assessment area in the module that you're creating the assignment in, and you click on the Build Content button. This will give you a few options of different types of content, and the content you're after is the content folder. Simply click on that. Enter a name for the assignment folder into the name box, and then enter the student declaration into the large text box underneath it. Now you can copy and paste that declaration from the university web pages. Once you're happy with that, click on the Submit button, and you'll now have an assignment folder in the assessment area of your Blackboard module. Now we're going to create the assignments, the draft assignment and the final submission assignment, in that folder. So make sure you click on the folder name to go into the folder. We're first of all going to create a draft submission area for students to submit work so they can check their references and citations. They can submit their assignments as many times as they like to the draft submission area, so they can keep submitting until they're happy with that submission. And once you've set up the draft submission area, you don't need to worry about it. You can just leave it there for the students to use. So we click on the Create Assessment button and choose Turnitin UK Assignment. Now you may or may not get an option to choose the assignment type that you want to create. Either way, just leave it as default of paper assignment and click on Next Step. We're now presented with a nice simple form to fill in. So the assignment title, we enter the name of the assignment and we put the word draft, make it stand out in the title. So I put mine in capital letters. It's just so that there's no confusion for the students over whether this is the draft area or the final submission area. We'll leave the points as zero. We'll leave the points value alone. We're not going to mark this assignment. The start date we'll leave as today's date because we want the assignment to be available to the students as soon as possible. The due date, because this is the draft area and it's not going to be marked, there's technically no due date needs to be set for it. But just to make everything safe, if you set the due date for the end of the module. Now the post date is the date that the students get the marks, and as I've said, this is a draft area, so there's no marks set against this particular assignment area. The one rule about the post date is it has to be after the due date. So I've set mine as the day after the date I set as the due date. We can see once that's set, we've got an optional settings option. We click on the plus sign next to that. The optional settings are the settings that differentiate between a draft area and a final submission area. So in the special instructions, this is where we enter the fact that it is a draft submission area. They can submit as many times as they like to check their references and citations. There's also a link there for a guide, and you can put any instructions that you feel are appropriate, specific for this assignment as well. It asks us if we need to allow submissions after the due date. We can leave that as yes, even though there's technically no due date for this assignment, so we can just leave it as yes. And generate originality reports, yes, because that's the whole point of having a draft submissions area, for students to be able to check their originality report. So we make sure that's set as yes. Now this third setting here, generate originality reports for student submissions, this is something specific for a draft assignment area. We need to make sure that it immediately can overwrite reports until the due date. What this means is that the student can submit as many times as they like up until the due date, and any subsequent submissions overwrite any previous submissions. We scroll down the form a bit, and now we get some options on any exclusions we want. So do we want to exclude bibliographic materials, any quoted material, any small matches? Leave these all as no. We want to include everything. Do we want to allow the students to see the originality reports? Of course, yes, we do want them to see the originality report so they can check their referencing. And do we want to reveal grades to students only on the post date? I've left this as no, because we don't actually reveal any grades to them because it's not marked, so I just left that as no. At the bottom, enable anonymous marking. Again, I've left that as no because we're not going to mark this submission anyway. We now scroll down to the bottom of the form, and it asks us where we want to submit our papers to. Now in here we select no repository. It's because we don't want Turnitin keeping a record of any draft submissions that we've made. If we left that as the student paper repository, then any second or third or fourth draft submissions the student makes will be checked against previous submissions, so they get a very high score on their similarity. So leave it as no repository or change it to no repository. The search options, these are the areas that Turnitin is going to search for information stored within this submission. So we'll leave those all ticked, and then it gives us an option if we want to attach a rubric to this assignment. That's a whole other video, information video, so we'll leave that as no rubric. We have a quick check to make sure we're happy with all the settings, and we click on the submit button. And that brings us back to our assignment folder. We can then see we've got our draft assignments held in that folder, and we can go ahead and create the final assignment. So again, we click on the Create Assessment button and we choose Turnitin UK Assignment. It's more likely on this second go that we will be asked to select an assignment type, so we just leave it as Paper Assignment and click on Next Step. It brings us to that same form to fill in, but the settings are going to be slightly different because this is a final submission area. So we enter an assignment title, and again make sure that the word final stands out for the students so they know that this is for their final submissions, not a draft area. We can put a points value in there, mark it out of 100. If there's any weighting for your assignment, that can be done in Banner afterwards, so mark it out of 100 makes life a lot simpler. The start date, again, we can leave as today's date because we want to leave it as make it available as early as possible for our students. The due date we set for the date that the assignment is due. Now the rules are that you can't have an assignment set for submission on a Monday. So avoid any Mondays. You can't have it set for a submission date of a weekend, so you can't have it the due date as a Saturday or Sunday. And also the time of submission underneath the date, the due date, we've got a time that needs to be set to 4 PM, 1600 hours. This means that students, when they submit their assignments, if there's a problem, they'll be able to get support either from ITS or from the digital skills team, or within the school itself, they'll be able to get support. So make sure that's set as 1600. The post date is 3 weeks after the due date, so it's 15 working days. So we set that for 3 weeks afterwards, and again set the time for 1600 hours for 4 PM, so that it's exactly 15 days after the due date. Once we're happy with those dates, again we click on our optional settings button. Obviously the special instructions area is going to be different to the draft submissions area, so we need to tell the students that it's their final submission area and they're only allowed to submit once that area. Once it's submitted, it's counted as final and they can't change it. We can tell them that submissions are allowed after the due date, but of course that's going to be flagged up and they may get a late penalty for the assignment submission unless they've got a student support plan or a PMC form. So once we put the special instructions in there, we set it so that we do allow submissions after the due date, so that needs to be yes. Generate originality reports. You will want to see the originality report for the submission, so again set that as yes, but we change the originality report student submissions to immediately first report is final. What that does is it sets it so there's only a single submission allowed for this assignment. We scroll down our form. Again, it gives us some options for exclusions of bibliographic material, quoted material or small matches. Leave those as no. When it goes into looking at the originality report of the submission, we can filter those out within the actual submission itself. So we'll leave those as no. Allow students to see the originality report. We set this to no as well. This is for us to look at. This is for the lecturer to look at to check the originality. And reveal grades to students only on the post date, we change that to yes. Anonymous marking. Some schools set anonymous marking against their assignments. So if you have got anonymous marking, change that to yes. Be aware that if you do have anonymous marking set, that editing the settings on this assignment sometimes can be a little bit problematic. It's difficult to change the dates, the due dates and the post dates of assignments if they've been set to anonymous marking. We scroll to the bottom of this form and it asks us where we want to submit our papers to. Now we change that to standard paper repository. This means that a copy of this submission goes into the Turnitin archives and any subsequent submissions are checked against this submission, so you can see if there's any collusion, if there's any copying. It asks us our search options. Again, leave these as the three boxes ticked. Student paper repository, so it's checking there. It checks archived internet, our current internet, and it checks periodicals, journals and publications. At the bottom again, if we want to attach a rubric to it, we can, but we just simply click on our submit button. And that brings us back to our assignment folder, where we can see our draft assignment and our final assignment set within the folder. We can then send out an announcement to our students saying that these areas are available for submitting assignments.